So, shall I say who we are, or shall I say who I am and you say who you are?
Let's each say who we are.
Yes.
Individually. Okay. So let's try this. Let's try this again.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Samuel Hansen.
And I'm Peter Rowlett, and Samuel is visiting me in Nottingham. And while he's here, I'm taking him on a bit of a mathematical history tour of the system. Hello, I'm Peter Rowlett.
And I'm Samuel Hansen, and I happen to be in England visiting Peter, something that wouldn't happen very often. So he decided to take me on a mathematical history tour of Nottingham. Hello, I'm Samuel Hansen.
And I'm Peter Rowlett.
You're late as usual.
Yes. I'm just drinking from my George Green mug. George Green was born in 1793. His father was also called George Green and was a baker in Nottingham. And while our George Green was a boy, his father built the mill, which is behind us. And it's thought that George Green did a lot of his mathematical work, particularly his early work, while working at the mill. And there's a sign behind us with an inscription, a quote from him. He describes having done the mathematics in hours stolen from my sleep.
Leibniz did at one point, before he published his version, have a letter of Newton's that described his version of the calculus, and this caused a rather big schism between both the English and the continental calculus schools.
So we're now at the Nottingham High School, which is taken over from what once was the Nottingham Free School in Stony Street in Nottingham, where a man called John Topless was headmaster. And John Topless was a keen mathematician, and he'd been to Cambridge, and then he was master of the school here, and he actually published a translation of
Laplace, and it is generally considered that he heavily influenced George Green in the work that he did, and Laplace was part of the continental school of calculus.
So this is a possible answer to the question. Actually, I have a book here which is a history of Nottingham High School, which quotes a biography by H.G. Green, a biography of George Green written in 1946, as saying that it has been claimed internal evidence proves Green's indebtedness to Topless's book for the inspiration of his famous essay. George Green was a subscriber at the library in the early 1800s, and it's thought this is where he read much of his mathematics. In 1828, he published an essay on the application of mathematical analysis to the theories of electricity and magnetism. And this was published by subscription through the Nottingham Library. One copy of the essay went to Edward Bromhead, who lived near Lincoln. Bromhead had been at Cambridge with Babbage and was part of a group of people who were interested in the Leibnizian form of calculus coming from the continent. So Bromhead recognised the significance of the essay. Bromhead began a correspondence with Green and encouraged him to produce further works of mathematics, and ultimately encouraged him to go to Cambridge to read mathematics. So George Green had published the essay and had died in relative obscurity in Nottingham. And his work was fairly unknown, but now we know about him today, and I have my George Green mug. So how did that happen? So the story is that young Thomson, who later became Lord Kelvin, was reading widely on electricity and came across a reference to the remarkable essay of Mr. Green of Nottingham, but he couldn't find a copy of this essay. So then he was at Cambridge having dinner with his tutor one night, and he found out his tutor had 3 copies of the essay. You can sort of imagine George Green, when he went to Cambridge, wandering around giving people copies of the essay. So Kelvin Thomson then goes to Paris with 2 copies of the essay in his bag, and he gives one to somebody, and they promise to publish it in a German journal of mathematics. And it's from there that the sort of snowball begins. And Kelvin's contemporaries are Stokes and Clerk Maxwell and people like that, and this is where the whole effect of what Green did starts to have an effect.
Now that's something that the Burroughs Company, which I know a little bit about, actually helped to do, because they were originally an adding machine company, American Arithmeter Corporation, I believe. I may have that a little bit mixed up. They're in St. Louis, Missouri, and then 6 years after Burroughs' death himself, they moved to Detroit. This was 1904, and they changed the name to the Burroughs Adding Machine Company. And then they started creating programmable. They created some of the first programmable ledger machines, and then they were actually one of the big 6 during the original computer revolution in the 60s.
Right. Now, we know from the British Society for the History of Mathematics, the BSHM, at bshm.org, have a list of places in the UK and stuff that's happened there in maths history. And one of the entries for Nottingham says Burroughs adding machines first began overseas production of adding machines in Nottingham in 1898. Okay, and here we are in the meadows in Nottingham, and behind us is that church from the map that we found through David Singmaster's clue. Now, the position of that church tells us that this is Arkwright Street, and actually nowadays it's called Arkwright Walk, and it's a pedestrian walkway. And if you remember Arkwright Street, the church was on the opposite side from the factory, which that means that the factory is over there. Okay, so we're around the corner from where we were. The road configuration has changed. They redeveloped this whole area in the 1970s, 80s, and they changed all the roads, but there is no longer a Kirkby Street or a Bell Street, but there is a Kirkby Gardens, which is not quite where Kirkby Street used to be, but almost. And from that we can work out where the factory used to be, and the factory used to be within this site that we're stood by now, which is now a school, Greenfield School. Now I know one of the things that happened in Nottingham that's related to mathematical history is that Einstein visited in 1930, a year before he came to Oxford. This book doesn't mention it, but let's go and find out more. Okay, so when Einstein lectured at the University College, at the end of the lecture, a blackboard that he'd used was varnished over and preserved, and this is it, on display in the School of Physics at the University of Nottingham. And yes, the account I read tells that the German students couldn't understand the physics, and the physicists couldn't understand the German. And at the end there was a chap in the room who understood physics and German, and he stood up and gave a quick précis of what Einstein had spoken about.
I don't know, my favorite little story that's told here is a letter from Elsa Einstein, Einstein's wife, to Professor Frank Granger about £5 that Professor Granger had lent to Einstein, which had not yet been posted back. But, as she explains, her husband never dealt with the money.
There we go. That's a bit better. Good. Yeah. That was.
Does it end up on TV?
Sorry?
Does it end up on TV?
No.
No. Oh, shit. Oh, no.